failed at the first hurdle of not putting my mic on. It's been a while since I've had to put my microphone on. So, yes, hi everybody. Very warm welcome to the Scrutiny meeting. We have got a few apologies today. Let me get my list. So we've got apologies from John Roy, Claire Doyle and Jenny Sims. And then I know the Chief Constable is going to be joining us slightly later into the meeting. If we just do introductions very briefly for anybody watching online. So I'm Emily Sporrell, I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Sue McTaggart, Chief Executive for the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Afternoon, Ian Critchley, Deputy Chief Constable.
Good afternoon, Chris Green, ACC for Investigations and Intelligence.
Good afternoon, Paul White, Assistant Chief Constable for Matrix and Response and Resolution.
Good afternoon, Keith Dickinson, Director of Resources.
Afternoon, Louise Kane, Head of Performance and Analytics at Merseyside Police.
Kim Dawson, Scrutiny and Improvement Officer at the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner.
And James Lation, Head of Private Office to the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Oh yes, and then online as well, John.
Hi, John Rowley, Chief Finance Officer, Police and Crime Commissioner. Thank you.
Okay, there's nobody else online, is there? No. It's very small, that screen. Okay, right, thank you for that. So if we move straight on then, minutes of the last meeting, does anybody have any amendments or anything they want to correct? Everybody happy with those as accurate record? Yep. Okay, super. In terms of the actions from the last meeting, there's no outstanding actions, and the actions I think from the last meeting are all recorded, so they're all up to date. Is that right, Kim? Nothing to flag? Yep, okay. Okay, super. So we move straight on to the next item then, which is our data dashboard. So for anybody who might be watching online, this is something that we introduced at the last meeting, just to have a bit of a snapshot in terms of the broad crime types and what may or may not have changed in the last quarter. So unfortunately we can't share it because of the limitations of the tech, but it is available on the website if anybody wants to look online and follow the discussion. Right, Louise, do you want to mention anything on this? Where's me?
Commissioner, the only exceptions that we obviously, as you know, we will look at the exceptions within the dashboard and feed that back to yourself. There were areas of exception that we have raised with you is the percentage of 999 calls answered within 10 seconds. Some exceptions within domestic abuse for stalking and harassment, and theft person, recorded homicide. So they're the exceptions within the dashboard this month.
Sorry, I've got a lot of paper. Right, so right, okay, so there was a couple of questions that we had when we looked at this. In terms of the 999 calls and the percentage answered within 10 seconds, do we know why, obviously there's a target for 10 seconds, do we know why we're below that target?
Yeah, Commissioner, I'm happy to answer that. So, as you'd be aware, demand's been increasing throughout the year in relation to treble 9 calls. So between the 1st of April to the 10th of December, which is, we've answered 8,000 more than in the same period from the previous year. And it's also the case that the non-emergency calls, the 101 calls, are also increased. So overall, we're answering approximately 11,000 more calls than last year. What we're also seeing is that the time taken to answer those calls over the last 18 months is increasing, due primarily to the complexity of the call. And because of that, we have to ensure that we gather all the relevant information from the caller to make an effective decision about the best way to resolve the call. And there's a number of ways, and I know you're aware of this, in terms of how we would resolve that call, which is to send it to dispatch immediately for an emergency or priority call. We would send it to the crime demand unit for the matter to be resolved by criming and resolution, and then onward allocation to the investigation strand, or to the scheduled incident response team. Would be a slow time response to a domestic abuse type of incident, and where they can schedule an appointment or resolve immediately. We also have a requirement, as you'll be aware, to thrive the call to ensure we get the relevant information. So that takes a little bit longer, and with the increased volume, of course, that therefore has an impact on the ability to answer the call within the 10-second target. For some reassurance, we're still third in terms of our most similar forces for this compared to the same period, April to the end of October. And we also have an issue around maintaining our workforce. We've lost a number of staff who've moved on from the contact centre into other roles within Merseyside Police. So good in terms of staff development, but then there's always an ongoing issue in terms of the attrition and trying to catch up in terms of resourcing the call centre.
Okay, thank you. So as you highlighted, there were some issues around an increase in terms of domestic abuse and also with harassment, but I'm conscious that we'll go on to discuss those in more detail as we go on the agenda. There's been a slight or marginal decrease in theft from person. Do we know what that's attributed to?
Yeah, Commissioner, Zoe Thornton leads for us as the SRO around this. This is featured as part of my DEP's performance meeting and some scrutiny from the ACCs around it. So, some of the work that we've been done has just determined that the category in which it's recorded, it's been more theft rather than theft from the person. It's been categorised as other thefts as well. So we've basically done some what you'd say is housekeeping to make sure that it appropriately represents the crime that has occurred. So that's taken place with some rigour over the last couple of months. However, we've also been presented by our Force Intelligence team where there has been hotspots for theft from the persons, the arrests that have been made. Some of those hotspots have been in Liverpool city centre. A number of arrests have been made, and again, they are being followed through with appropriate rigour, particularly where there is organised element to that. So in relation to your question, the decrease largely comes from some tidying up in terms of actually making sure the appropriate crimes are recorded in the right way.
Okay, good. And then another positive, lower than expected decrease in relation to burglary residential as well. Is there anything in terms of the commentary on that?
I think we go into it in a little bit more detail during the course of the meeting as well. Again, we've seen considerable reductions year on year in relation to burglary residential. We're now currently year to date 534 crimes less than the previous year, and that's similar to the reduction that there was the previous year as well. A lot of work been done across our local policing areas in relation to the identification of hotspot areas, the identification of perpetrators or persistent and repeat perpetrators. Where burglaries happen, we do the super cocooning, in essence, going around those areas, making sure that other properties are safe. We continue to have the Operation Castle work led by Chris's team, a real focus intent on those who cause the most harm, which again has had some considerable success in terms of bringing offenders to justice as well. So a good news story. On top of, obviously, enhancements in technology. So we've seen things like Ring doorbells. Again, the Castle team have done a lot of work around proactively seeking to get Ring doorbell footage, whether there's been a burglary occurred or indeed suspicious incidents, which again is able to identify repeat perpetrators as well. We've also done a rapid review through Louise's team of our position in relation to burglary, which have ranged from the deployment to all burglaries. It was a position that we were previously taking anyway, unless there is a specific reason why there would be a delay. So there was a review done by the College of Policing against the 4P plan that's owned. There's no let-up on focus. There's an acceleration. We recognise how important this crime is on members of the public. We seek to obviously focus on preventing it, which is good to see the year-on-year reductions. But knowing the impact this has on victims, the importance of bringing offenders to justice, and we continue with our relentless approach around that area.
A couple of months ago, obviously in October, there was a bit of a spotlight on police response to burglary, and I know that the Chief and yourself made that commitment from Merseyside Police to respond, to attend to all reports of burglaries. So it was just to say how you manage that in terms of resourcing and how successful you are at it.
It was a position that was already taken, obviously, Paul, through the contacts and the response. We continue to review that through Louise as that reports into our meetings. There are reasons why you would never achieve 100% attendance at all burglary, recognising that that may would be done. There will be exceptions to that, but it's a position that we've taken in essence and is continually monitored. Paul, I don't know if there's anything else you want to raise in relation to that.
Yeah, Commissioner, I mean, prior to even that sort of national direction and steer. Our position has always been that where the victim requests an attendance and it's appropriate to do so, we will attempt to attend in 100% of cases. We don't always achieve that, but our compliance with that is very high, and will ensure that that continues.
And just in the context of against other forces at the moment, so we are down in relation to all burglary, we're down 11% at this moment in time between April and September. I've given you the figures for burglary residential. Most similar forces are up 11%, and North West average up 3%. And again, our outcomes as of April September are 8%, which compares favourably with most similar forces and the North West average as well.
So most other forces have seen a slight increase, but we've seen a significant decrease. So
yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, very welcome. Okay, great. Any other questions on the dashboard? No? Okay, thank you for that. And I'm conscious that we'll come back to some of those other issues as well as we go through the agenda. So the next item then is around emerging issues. So again, this is just an opportunity to kind of respond to anything that's happened since the last meeting that we think warrants a public response. So there are a couple of reports that have come out in the last couple of months. The first one, which obviously was kind of widely reported on, around the HMIC FRS report on vetting, misconduct and misogyny, and it had a number of recommendations for police forces to respond to. In terms of Merseyside, is there anything in terms of you're doing a review of how you respond to some of those recommendations within the report?
I think it would be right to acknowledge the importance of this report as well as the Casey report. Whilst that was in relation to standards within the Met, we pitched ourselves certainly against the 13 findings in relation to that, and whilst that was specific about another force area, there were certainly areas where we've transposed across in terms of conduct and standards within our force. It is right to say, Commissioner, that as you know, every single day our staff go and do amazing things, both in terms of our frontline staff as well as those that support them, to do a brilliant job in the most difficult of circumstances. But it's also right to acknowledge there is conduct and standards, some of which doesn't belong in relation to any police force, some of which is where we need to make sure there's the appropriate learning put in place to seek to prevent that taking place. So in relation to that, clearly vetting, which relates not just to people coming into our organisation, but those people who need to be re-vetted in relation to other roles or changes in circumstances that occur. Some of the key recommendations from that report, and we submitted a self-assessment in relation to that report with the key recommendations. We're updating minimum standards for pre-employment checks, establishing better process for assessing, analysing and managing risks related to vetting decisions, corruption investigations and information security, analysing vetting data to identify, understand and respond to disproportionality as well, and extending the scope of the law relating to police complaints and misconduct procedures, i.e. re-vetting post-misconduct proceedings as well. The force has a robust decision-making and recording process in place in terms of vetting procedures and decisions. However, we did not have a vetting appeals panel, which is currently being explored, led by myself and Jenny Wilson. The College of Policing have committed to issuing revised vetting authorised professional practice by October 2023. Which will be about a review of the minimum standards, and we will remain committed to seeking to implement any changes. We have an existing area for improvement from HMI in relation to connection with management vetting for designated posts. So certain posts require an enhanced level of vetting. Clearly, we had to balance our requirement to vet the increased and enhanced uplift positions as well around it, which has meant we've had to, on a risk basis, determine where we best put our assets, which have been focused on uplift and staff coming into our organisation. But we have a plan in place in terms of managing those designated posts. So, some other areas around making sure that we are at all times routinely using things like PND, the Police National Database, to give us that richer picture of information around it. And we introduced a new system in June 2022, which gives us a better baseline in terms of the analysis of data, obviously working between the vetting team, Jen Wilson's team as the head of PSD, and Louise's team to analyse any specific information. I keep this under review on my senior leadership teams, and Jen Wilson reports into strategic management board process. In relation to the Casey report, we've presented at our Chief Officer group, as you are aware, in terms of some of the areas that we are taking forward, some of how the data is analysed, particularly around our acceleration and approach around violence against women and girls, and also around inclusion, recognising some disproportionality around that, and assurance from myself, Commissioner, that they are being taken forward with the utmost importance as well. Obviously, we'll report back in due course or answer any further questions that you have.
Okay, great, thank you. So the second report then that was released was in relation to, it was the Independent Advisory Panel on Deaths in Custody, and this was looking at a kind of wide range of policing practices, but looking at obviously those people who have died or in some cases have taken their own lives after custody, and it made a number of recommendations, and obviously there's a lot of links there in terms of mental health as well. So from a Merseyside perspective, have we reflected on that, and is there anything that we're taking learning from or building on what we're already doing?
So again, another really important report for us, overseen and led by Claire Doyle and Nick Gunnar-Saliki. Merseyside custody practice have continued to develop to improve the care for all detainees, especially those with mental health problems. Our practices are broadly in line with the recommendations in terms of risk assessment, both at point of detention and release, as well as interlaced care whilst in custody. We've developed our training for staff, and clearly yearly re-accreditation for staff. That's included around the area of neurodiversity to improve care for those detainees, part of the neurodivergent community. We note the recommendation on 24-hour access to mental health support in custody. You know our service that we've got in place, our own liaison and diversion schemes provided by the NHS. That covers between 7 o'clock in the morning and 1 o'clock in the morning, so a period of 6 hours, but we're confident that that gap is covered by other clinical support in the suites and our own liaison diversion service to undertake follow-up contact with detainees. They're also developing a scrutiny panel process, and once that national guidance has been developed on this, we'll continue to fully engage with yourself to ensure oversight of areas that came out of there around use of force, disproportionality, and strip searches in the custody environment as well. So action plan wrapped around those, obviously Nick and Claire leading reporting into criminal justice and reporting to strategic management board as well, but good oversight and leadership and an acknowledgement of the recommendations. Okay, good, thank you for that update. Anything else in emergency? No. Okay, right, thank you for that. If we move on now then to section 5 of the agenda, which is the focus today on tackling violence against women and girls. So I think the first one we've got is harmful practices, is that right? Louise, are you going to talk us through that?
Thanks, Commissioner. So harmful practices are forms of violence or abuse that are presented as acceptable cultural practices. Girls and women are often most affected by them, although males can also be vulnerable. The use of harmful practices are intended to control the victim through controlling coercive and or threatening behaviour, and that can include psychological, physical, sexual, financial or emotional abuse. So harmful practices include, but are not limited to, forced marriage, introduced as an offence in 2014, honour-based abuse and female genital mutilation, known as FGM. These practices are used to control behaviour, to protect perceived cultural and religious beliefs, and occur when it's perceived that shame or dishonour is being brought against a family or a community. A common attribute of such practices is that they are related to women's sexuality and an underlying subcontext of male domination. So the chart that you can see here demonstrates that from September 2020 to September 21, there was 25 crimes recorded out of 46 occurrences, as we call them, in force. So 46 records, and 25 of those become a crime. Forced marriage, there was 5 occurrences reported and 1 became a crime. And FGM, 7 occurrences and 1 became a crime. We have, obviously, since we all beginning the calendar year, we have a number of intelligence logs which resulted in occurrences again around honour-based violence. the majority of those recorded relate to controlling behaviour by the victim's partner. Other themes include things like family abroad that threatening females in the UK due to the choice of lifestyle. Another is around females being threatened by parents due to disclosing that they are not heterosexual, and the majority of the intelligence logged data pertain to date are against forced marriage. What you can also see on the chart is the sources of those occurrences or referrals between January, and you can see for all of those categories the majority of records are created by police.
So just in terms of going back a bit, when you were saying then you'd had 46 occurrences, but only 25 have been crimed. Why? Because that's nearly half. Why were the other half not? What's the reason for that? On what basis would you not crime it? Just explain that.
Sorry, there are lots of reasons that, you know, the Home Office can't rule threshold, so sufficient evidence to prove a crime has occurred. But just because they're occurrences doesn't mean that they wouldn't be investigated. They might be investigated as non-crime occurrences and still allocated to investigators.
And then I think, and I remember we spoke about this last year when we looked at this, that the numbers are still incredibly low, and particularly from our non-police referrals. You know, is there more that we could be doing to encourage either victims themselves or those partners who probably are more likely to be coming into contact to actually report these things into the force? Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I'll take that one. So our position is largely in line with what the Domestic Abuse Commissioner found nationally in a recent study. So we're not out of kilter with the rest of the country, and the majority of referrals do come from policing rather than other agencies. That said, the work that we're doing, I mean, you will know that our harmful practices Merseyside Pan-Merseyside group, we have a chair of that, so one of the leaders from health chairs that for us. The subgroup, the training subgroup, have done an awful lot of work looking at how we raise awareness and raise training with partner agencies, third sector. And they've developed a number of sway packages which are obviously interactive and can go across all of the different agencies and accessible. There's 6 of those sway packages which have been rolled out and delivered, which have proved to be hugely successful, and we're just monitoring the evaluation of that over the next few months. We have a DCI who chairs a Tackling Domestic Abuse meeting with partners right the way across Merseyside, including academia, the CPS, courts and the local authority, IDVAs and third sector. A key attendee at that is Severe UK, and you know Severe UK, really strong representation in Merseyside. We obviously were with them at the launch of the Victim Care Merseyside Hub recently, and again, just another example of actually that work to spread awareness and etc. So as you say, we can always, and we will continue to do as much as we can, because we know that we need the information from the wider sector rather than just the police referrals, because we know this is a particularly hard to reach area for people to have confidence to actually report to us and then take on.
Okay, good. And then in terms of the safeguarding approach, because obviously these individuals who come forward will be particularly vulnerable, what is the process for that? Are we confident we've got the right safeguarding process in place to keep people safe?
Yeah, so again, lots being done, including with your office, in terms of to ensure victims are able to access information in their own language, so that we've got that ability to understand exactly what the victim needs. Wider engagements in terms of the community engagement unit out into hard to reach groups. But in terms of ensuring that we've got appropriate safeguarding measures in place, yeah, obviously you can see the numbers are relatively small, so it's easier for us to dip into every single one of those and make sure that the appropriate wraparound support and safeguarding measures are there. That features in a number of the governance meetings, both at a local level and then across multi-agency, and it then feeds in through the harmful practices group into me, which I report back into the Strategic Partnership and Policing Board.
Great. Okay, thank you for that. Any questions? No. Okay, if we move on now, then I think on to domestic abuse.
Thanks, Commissioner. The this slide, the next slide. This slide shows the April 22 to September 22 period. That there have been a total of 17,377 domestic abuse crimes recorded. That compares to the 16,160 the same period last year, so a difference just in that period of 7.4%. The outcomes this financial year to date, there's an increase of 90, that's 8% on last year. So currently 1,203 solved outcomes. That gives us a solved outcome rate of 7.3 compared to 7.2 last year. The majority, the biggest proportion of the category of domestic abuse is violence without injury. That makes up 37% of the total, followed by stalk and harassment at 28%, violence with injury at 15%.
Do we know why there's been an increase? Do we have any sense as to why there's an increase in the number of recorded incidents, and if there's anything that's driving that in particular?
So there's an element of this which is in relation to crime recording standards and the changing in crime recording standards to ensure that we record the correct number of crimes with the increased number of incidents. So the violence without injury, stalking and harassment, key drivers for that has been said. So that secondary crime, so where we've got the primary offence, and now in terms of crime recording, there's a secondary and sometimes a tertiary crime that then is linked to that. So we see with the one incident there might be two or three crimes. So that is definitely a proportion of it. Clearly our continued work to raise awareness and actually wanting people, victims, to come forward and report to us as well. So it's actually a positive that we're seeing people who previously wouldn't have reported coming forward and having the confidence to report so that we can deal with it.
And do we know how we compare to our most similar forces in terms of recorded incidents? Louise?
Commissioner, no, we don't, because domestic abuse is what we call a flagged crime. So you have the original Home Office counting rule, say violence with injury or something, and then it's flagged by the force as domestic abuse. It's not on systems, so it's not nationally compared. Okay.
So Merseyside Police recently started, which I know they've done before and we discussed in our meeting last year, around a domestic abuse intensification period. Can you just give us a bit of detail in terms of what that's going to involve and what impact we'll hopefully see?
Yeah, of course, Commissioner. So concentrating on three broad areas really at the moment. It commenced on the 6th of November. So improving officers' knowledge, awareness and training around evidence-led prosecution. So this is effectively where we may have a victim who doesn't wish to provide an evidential statement in terms of what has happened, and the officers will examine and use all of the available evidence around the particular incident to put together an evidence-led prosecution to present to the Crown Prosecution Service for consideration of charge if appropriate. Stalking and harassment, including the investigative checklist, and also, very importantly, voice of the child. And you know the focus that we have on it, ensuring that the protection of children who are associated, they're present or impacted upon by domestic abuse, and ensuring that we understand that we've heard that voice of the child. So that focus has looked at improving the outcome for domestic abuse, and we'll come on to that. Increasing the number of arrests at domestic abuse incidents. So during this intensification period, we have gone on for an average of around about 100 arrests per month to 130 arrests per month. Again, the evaluation of that as the fluctuation across the year be really important to ensure that we can look to then maintain that new threshold as we move forward. So an awful lot of work with Paul's team at the front end in terms of that initial incident responded to, and taking that proactive action when it's appropriate, when the offender is at scene and it's appropriate to arrest. Secondly, to ensure that if the offender is not there and the opportunity to arrest is not immediately available, that referral is immediately sent through to our targeted teams and our Operation Hunted teams without delay. So again, those officers can be focused and targeted on identifying where the offender is and arrest as quickly as possible. We know there's a direct correlation between the confidence and satisfaction with victims, where we can make that swift intervention, bring someone into custody, and we know it gives us better chances of gathering best evidence and being able to charge offenders. So the increasing understanding of the evidence that is needed for an evidence-led prosecution. So I dialed into one of the continuous professional development events that has been run. So we've had about 500 officers go through a 2-hour CPD session, excellent session with a whole series of different inputs right the way across our delivery plans in relation to tackling domestic abuse. We've had officers from all the strands across the force, good engagement through the session, and we've still got, I think, 3 more of those CPD sessions to go. So really good to take part in those and understand the level of quality of the training and awareness to our staff and the impact it's making. And of course, you can see the direct link in terms of additional evidence-led prosecutions. So I think the data so far during the intensification period, so during October, we submitted 66 evidence-led prosecution cases to the Crown Prosecution Service. Through the summer, that number will have been around about the low 30s, so we doubled the number in October. Again, what we need to do now is maintain that level so that actually the training sticks and we actually get more of those evidence-led prosecutions going through, because that feeds into the outcome rate. The increased use of the stalking checklist. So again, we have the stalking checklist within our merit risk assessments for all domestic abuse incidents, but we also have a separate and specific stalking checklist. So again, enhanced use of that, and we can see enhanced use of that at incidents where officers are becoming more aware, more familiar with what stalking is, noticing the signs, and actually the checklist has helped them to include, and of course that probably feeds into that increase in crime recording as well. Officers recognising, filling the checklist in, and then leading to actually recording the crime on top of the primary incident. And then, as I said, importantly, the voice of the child. So a number of different mediums for briefing and raising awareness with staff. So I referenced the sway packages from the training subgroup of the PAN-MASA group. So one of those sway packages was Voice of the Child, so that's gone across all agencies. So that's our primary delivery tool. It takes about 11 or 12 minutes to go through that sway package. And again, interactive and really good to do on briefings with staff and to reiterate with all the staff across the force. We've also got some national products that have been rolled out through MPCC, and the Deputy ensured that they were cascaded across the force. Again, they supplement the sway packages with the same information. And we've also done some innovative stuff in force in terms of use of the animation, so some animation, so to keep officers interacted with the briefings. And again, we've monitored that both before the intensification, during the intensification, and we'll monitor it then afterwards. And we've seen an increase in reference to and use of Voice of the Child. We've done some quality dip samples into some of those, and we obviously self-assess the quality of the response, specifically looking at Voice of the Child. And we've probably seen about a 40% increase in the quality of how officers are recording children present, Voice of the Child, and how that is impacting.
Good. So lots of work being done, and I think it will be interesting to see if, as you say, that intensification, if that work continues. So actually, then it's just all year round we see that kind of same level of activity. One of the concerns that's raised with me quite a bit is the use of domestic violence protection notices, and obviously the domestic violence protection orders that we can now use, and how well Merseyside Police responds to those breaches of those orders. So do you know kind of how many are being used, and are you monitoring that and making sure that they are being proactively followed up by officers?
Yeah, so as you know, it's part of the work in terms of our framework in terms of violence against women and girls. It's specifically referenced in our intensification work. So I haven't got the numbers in front of me now, but we're monitoring those as we go through the intensification period across all of the orders, but yes, specifically the DVPOs and the DVPNs. And in fact, what we've seen is some of our superintendents as well, who obviously authorise those orders in the first instance. We've seen them engaging with the CPD around the evidence-led and the re gesti, and that has assisted in terms of the work on the DVPOs as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it'd be good to see the figures for outside of this meeting. So there's also recently been an HMIC FRS super complaint inspection around victims of police perpetrated domestic abuse, and obviously highlighted several recommendations for forces to implement. It does talk about making it clear that it is vitally important that forces respond and are seen to respond robustly when those domestic abuse allegations are made against police officers and staff. So from your perspective, what are Merseyside Police doing to take some of those recommendations forward, and what's our response for particularly police perpetrated domestic abuse?
So again, Commissioner, a really important piece of work led through both my team and the professional standards team, but working very much in conjunction with Chris and the Violence Against Women and Girls Programme Board that Chris leads. First of all, we undertook a review of all live police perpetrated domestic abuse cases to ensure appropriate leadership and coordination between both the criminal and the misconduct investigation. We ensure that suitably qualified investigators are appointed who are independent and impartial from any party involved, and there's monthly joint scrutiny between investigation and PSD of all police perpetrated domestic abuse cases. This enhanced scrutiny ensures progression in accordance with our authorised professional practice, the Victims Code, and the recommendations from this super complaint as well. As you know, we also operate a workplace domestic abuse champions scheme where there's police perpetrated domestic abuse within and against colleagues as well, and that's something that's being refreshed as well to make sure we've appropriate trained staff. As part of the force's response to the VOG National Framework for Delivery, so talks about, Chris leads that work under 3 pillars: building trust and confidence, relentless perpetrator pursuit, and safe spaces. So we've made sure that we pursue opportunities to embed the learning from the super complaint within each of those projects. I won't go through every area that we're doing, but first, certainly training around our first line officer, training around trust and rapport, analysis of VOG complaint dissatisfaction. I've already talked about refreshing our domestic violence workplace champions. Service level agreement, and I think that's really important to ensure impartiality and independence of any investigating officer appointed to investigate a case. If we don't feel that can take place, given the nature of the role that the person plays, then I will seek to work with other forces to make sure there is an appropriate level of independence. The other really important area is the use of IDVA and ISVA support victims, both non-police but also police colleagues of police perpetrated domestic abuse, particularly where there may be, understandably, particularly where there is coercion and control reluctance of staff to either report or to continue through. The other cross-cutting area of this is around our Leadership and Me framework as well, which highlights the behaviours we expect from our staff, including the importance of being an upstander, not a bystander. So where this behaviour is witnessed, then we seek the support of colleagues to call it out, and that is part of our rolling first line leadership programme. Number of force communications around this, both externally and internally, around our commitment around the importance of this and the standards that we expect of our colleagues, and that we seek to bring them to justice where offences have taken place, either through a criminal route or indeed through misconduct route as well. The final bit of that is we encourage the confidential reporting app across the force, and that's continued in development as well.
Okay, thank you for that update. And then I suppose my last question then is in terms of victim feedback and engagement in terms of satisfaction of victims. So the specified information order, which is obviously a kind of national standard of data that we record, talks about how we measure the satisfaction of victims of domestic abuse. And obviously I know there's more work going on as well in terms of really trying to have those conversations with victims to try and get that continuous feedback about the offer from and the response from Merseyside Police. So can you just talk a bit about the SAO recording, but also anything else in terms of how you're engaging with victims?
Yeah, so a variety and expanding portfolio of ways in which we are engaging with victims, but specifically in terms of the first question, in terms of the sample size and response rate. So as you'll be aware, there's a stringent exclusion criteria that's applied on a monthly basis to ensure that the selected volume of domestic abuse cases, we ensure that the high risk or vulnerable victims are taken out of that, so that it's appropriate safeguarding in place in terms of that cohort. The data set's then cleansed, and through the information sharing and contractual agreement that we have, we then send via a secure transfer to the specialist team in Leicestershire, who conduct the survey on our behalf. So just looking at the numbers, we send on average between 150 to 200 individuals to be surveyed per month. So that's just under 2,000 this year, and we've had 262 responses, so about a 14% response rate. This is up slightly on last year, and so that engagement continues. And whilst we would like to see that number grow in terms of engagement, clearly that's a position that we will continue to work with.
And then in terms of the broader pieces of work around victim engagement.
Yeah, so Victim's Voice, we've got a number of engagement sessions that Nairi Wayne has led in relation to the lived experience, and we've done that on a multi-agency basis as well, with learning coming out of that. We've also took an initiative recently from the Metropolitan Police in terms of walk and talk, and so we've piloted that within the city, which has been very successful in the pilot phase. So we're just going through an assessment and evaluation phase to see what the next steps for us are in relation to that, to ensure that we reach the groups that we need to reach, the hard to reach areas, and then we take what we learn from that and implement it into our delivery strategies. I guess the other, I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, any other questions around domestic abuse? No. Okay, thank you for that. If we move on then to rape, I think is the next slide. Louise?
Thanks, Commissioner. So this chart here shows between April 22 and September 22, there's been a 6% increase in rape crimes recorded across the force area. That's 775 compared to 734 last year. We've had a 41% increase in those crimes of cases that have taken place within the most recent 28 days. So an increase of people coming forward a lot sooner, basically, which is positive. That's gone from 94 last year to 133. With regards to the outcomes, the force is currently at 6% outcome rate. That's an increase on the 2.8% last year, so some significant increases, 121% increase in the number of crime outcomes that the force has achieved this year. So, yeah, That's it.
So in terms of the increase in reported incidents then, the suggestion is that there's been an increase, but it tends to be from more recent incidents rather than potentially historic. Is that what you mean, or kind of further?
Yeah, so that 41% increase is a more recent occurrences, basically more recent events within the 28 days, which shows people coming forward quicker.
Okay, good. And then in terms of the outcome rates, I mean, it's positive that it's going up, because I think that's obviously been a real focus for nationally, but particularly here on Merseyside as well. Albeit the outcome rates are still stubbornly quite low. So is there anything more that's being done to try and keep that progress going up?
Yeah, so incredible enhanced scrutiny around this area of business. So I chair a regular monthly oversight meeting. There's tactical meetings on a weekly basis. The 4P plan that we have in place across the force is robust, and it follows the excellent work of Operation Bluestone Soteria and national best practice. It is important to just note again that increase in positive outcomes this year. It's up 121%. So that is a significant an increase. And when we look at some of the reasons why that's happened, you know that we, over the last 12 months, have been doing the rape and serious sexual assault review. The recommendations from that review led to a number of business cases, which led to an uplift in our specially trained officers. So we now have 11 additional specially trained officers who respond immediately with our first line officers when we have reports, which has so far meant that we're being able to get to victims quicker and provide the support and assistance to ensure that we keep their confidence to continue with the report. We also have our dedicated gatekeeper in place, so an inspector and a sergeant, dedicated role, working with the officers with all of the files that are coming through for evidence before they get to the Crown Prosecution Service. And again, we're working with the CPS to ensure that at the earliest opportunity, we're seeking early investigative advice. We've got very much an offender focused on the investigations. And we know now that we're getting more cases through to the Crown Prosecution Service to consider, and we're being able to deal with the action plans that are coming back from an evidential point of view quicker, which means that actually we are getting more positive outcomes. So it was only yesterday that I did the monthly oversight meeting with all of the DCIs for the area. You know that we're one of the few forces that have a dedicated unity team that deal with the vast majority of our rape allegations. And so all of those things together are all going together to assist us as we move forward. And we've seen that shift now from the 2.3% consistently each month, and I fully expect that to continue. The focus is on actually pushing that way beyond where it is at the moment, because we know that behind every single one of those crimes there is a victim that needs justice.
No, and I think that's really positive. I really welcome that, because, I think it has only been a year since we last looked at this, and it is a significant improvement on last year. So absolutely welcome it. And I think, all those specialist resources are clearly doing their job, albeit there's still a journey to go on. But obviously that's, you're very aware of that. How do we compare to other forces in relation to that and outcomes? Do we know? Is that something we record? Are we doing better than others or worse?
The England and Wales average for the positive outcome rate for rape is 3.4%. So you can see that we're almost double that at 6%. Region is at 6%, so we're in line with that. Most similar force areas, some are, around that 1%. So it is a significant difference.
Commissioner, sorry, just before we move on, just probably one more point which is really important, which I failed to mention. And it's the work we're doing with RASA Merseyside and RASASC and Red Umbrella, the ISVAs. So that relationship with the ISVAs now and our frontline officers, the STOs and our investigators, we've got some joint work ongoing where we're doing clinics in each of the areas. So the ISVAs come in and spend time with the officers working alongside each other, clinics to ensure that we've got really good communication, really good relationships, everybody knows who everyone is, and so there's no breakdown in that communication, and that just leads to better victim support and victim care as we go through the journey. We've also had officers actually going and spending time with the ISVAs to understand what they do, how they do it, etc. And again, that's reaping real benefits. So, and it's keeping victims engaged on board with us and going through that process, which all leads into the more positive outcomes that we're seeing.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on that? No. Okay. Next one.
Other sexual offences, so up to between April and September this year, there's been a 5% increase in the numbers of crime. A third of them is sexual assault on a female aged 13 or over, followed by exposure at 7.4%. The crime outcome rate is currently at 12%, and that's an increase of over 6 percentage points on last year. We are, similar to the offence of rape, we are also seeing changes in the most recent crimes, so a 51% increase in 51% increase on crimes that have occurred within 28 days of reporting, and a 70% increase of offences occurred within a year. So a drop in the number of historic cases being reported to the force.
But arguably more recent ones coming forward, I suppose, hopefully, because people are more confident to report, which is what we would hope to see. Is there anything else to comment on this in terms of, I imagine the kind of the outcomes of the work is similar to what we've just discussed with rape. Is there anything else in particular around sexual offences to, again, improve outcomes and some of that work?
Nothing additional on that. I suppose I'll just reference and touch on the work we're doing with Operation Empower, and work in the nighttime economy around the prevention of the offences in the first place. So, you know, we have a really strong Operation Empower plan in place with dedicated officers who are briefed specifically to go out and identify where we've got individuals who might be displaying predatory behaviour towards women and girls in the city centre, predominantly in the nighttime economy, but also identify where we've got vulnerabilities, where we might have girls or women who've been split up from their friendship groups. Their phones might be out of power. They might be in need of some assistance to get them and direct them to a safe place or taxi rank, etc. So on the back of, you'll note the dispatches programme from a couple of weeks ago, and we're working with Channel 4 to investigate the matters that were identified both in the Metropolitan Police area and in Merseyside. And I saw firsthand this weekend on the nighttime economy, so the briefing of all of our staff. So all of our staff across the nighttime economy Operation Night Safe all received the briefing that identifies individuals who we believe are exhibiting predatory behaviour. There is plans in relation to what we can do to prevent those individuals, coming into the city centre. But if we can't, when they are in the city centre, we ensure we know who they are, and officers are looking to engage with them. And then again, that first-hand work of observing officers interacting with women and girls on Saturday night in the city centre who've been split up, being able to repatriate people, being able to ensure people got to taxi ranks, and being able to stop that the vulnerability. So, yeah.
Are you seeing then, in terms of that predatory behaviour bit, are you seeing a good response from officers being able to identify some of that behaviour? So not just the vulnerability, but also that predatory behaviour, and going intervening before they can find somebody who might be vulnerable. You're seeing some of that as well?
Yeah, and I won't go into the specific details, but we got specific details on our briefing sheets over the weekend of two individuals stopped 2 o'clock in the morning, and there was clear indication of predatory behaviour in terms of approaching women and girls who were on their own, sat, waiting to go home, and there was suitable intervention put in place there. And in fact, I saw it myself with officers. An interaction with members of the public and they told me they'd been stopped twice by officers because they were walking behind two girls. They were a friendship group. They were making sure they got to a taxi rank, but actually it looked as if there was potential for vulnerability and predatory behaviour, and they'd been stopped twice further down Wood Street by our officers. So again, it just demonstrates that from the briefing to actually what is happening out at 2-3 o'clock in the morning in the city, the reality of what is happening, which was great to see.
Good, good. That's very positive. Okay, thank you. If we move on to the next one, which I think is stalking.
Thanks, Commissioner. So this year we've had a reduction of 3.21% in the number of stalking cases, so 1,688. 91% of the category is domestic abuse related, 9% non-domestic abuse. With regards to outcomes, the current solved outcome rate is at 5.45%. They're slightly down on the 5.91% from last year, so 92 solved compared to 103 last year.
Okay, thank you. So did you say they'd slightly reduced from for the same quarter? Sorry, in terms of proportion.
A very slight reduction, 3.2%.
In terms of stalking, then I've had some kind of feedback from kind of victim organisations in terms of particularly call handlers and how we are identifying that stalking behaviour, and how do we feel that call handlers or police officers and staff are they doing enough? Do they understand the pattern of stalking and being able to kind of correctly record and acknowledge it at the earliest opportunity?
Commissioner, yeah, I'll come in on that one. So, yeah, our call handlers have access to a system called Call Assist in the contact centre that enables them to see if a victim has previously contacted the police previously. Once they've had that trigger, then they then cross-reference that with Force systems, so Storm, which is our command and control system, and Niche, which is our crime recording system, and then they can then review previous history in terms of previous contact. They can then tag that log appropriately, and that's done within the Thrive update, and then they can assess if there's been a repeat and what has happened previously and what action was taken in relation to that, and that will then inform the process and the way that we continue to manage that investigation thereafter. If it's any reassurance, when we were assessed by HMIC FRS in relation to that specific issue, then they were more than satisfied that we identify repeat victims at the first point of contact effectively.
And then in terms of kind of ongoing training, is there ongoing training for those officers and staff to just keep identifying those signs?
It's an ongoing piece of work, given that the priority for us. So there's a stalking and harassment checklist, so they can go through the questions, and then we're looking to develop that into a digital platform, so enable frontline officers to enable them to access the checklist and provide a better response. There's ongoing indicators to that sort of pattern of behaviour, whether it be sort of fixated behaviour, obsessive behaviour, unwarranted or repeated behaviour, and that then gears them towards the appropriate response. That training through the DA intensification period, we've given a number of CPDs from the 1st of January until the 13th of December. 691 officers and staff have attended the PVP National Vulnerability Training, and we've still got 3 sessions left in this year, so that figure will continue to rise. And that PVP
I have had feedback in terms of whether there's been a couple of cases that have been raised with me, which I have been fed through to the force, in terms of where that hasn't taken place. What do you do in terms of that line management approach, where if you're seeing call handlers or staff or officers repeatedly not reporting?
So that's a quality assurance process. We will dip sample all call handlers' performance. That's an ongoing process, and obviously people who come on who are brought to our attention more frequently, obviously there's greater scrutiny around the way that they manage their specific calls.
crime types and all police forces. Is there anything more we're doing, I suppose, in addition to what you've already talked about with domestic abuse, to try and improve some of those outcomes around stalking?
So I think everything I've said in relation to the work we're doing across rape and serious sexual assault and domestic abuse more broadly, this all relates to it. So there's nothing additional to say. That full menu of work ongoing.
Okay, and then the other question I have is in relation to, I guess, that safeguarding element and the use of stalking protection orders. When we met a year ago and looking at this issue, Merseyside typically had some of the lowest use of stalking protection orders. Do we know whether that's increased, and are we doing enough to try and make sure that that's being utilised by officers?
Again, Commissioner, it's a complex area for us, and we're continuing to, with the plans that we've got in place across our Vogue programme of work around all civil orders and all orders to improve the awareness, the knowledge. It goes back to the evidence-led prosecution and gathering the appropriate evidence to be able to then work with Force Legal to be able to apply for those orders. We're looking at some best practice from other forces, so we've reached out and done some benchmarking in other forces to ensure that we're doing everything we possibly can to increase. And it's work that we are continually focusing on in this area, and we'd like to see that increase in the number and the quality of those orders across the board.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on? Okay, thank you. If we move on then to harassment.
Okay, so this year we've seen a 9% increase in recorded crime of harassment. There's 7,509 crimes this year. We've currently got an outcome rate of 5.89. That's compared to the 6% last year, so a marginal decrease. That's a reduction of 39 of outcomes this year. When you then look at the April to September period, 37% of the offences are cyber-related offences, so 63% of those non-cyber.
Okay. Is there anything in addition to comment on this then in terms of how we're looking to improve outcomes and other than what we've already said?
I don't think so, Commissioner. These are all interrelated areas that all feature within our overall plan in terms of reducing domestic abuse offences where we can and bringing more offenders to justice. Unless you want me to touch on the Street Safe app and the use of.
Yes, in terms of public street harassment, that I think would be helpful in terms of the Street Safe app and how you're using it.
Yeah, so we had the Vogue programme board last week, the latest Vogue programme board. So at the moment, in terms of use of that Street Safe app, we're 16th across 43 forces across the UK in terms of use of it. We have seen peaks of that, the use of it, where we've been able to do more publicity. There was we just paused some work around the publicity to ensure that at the back end we had the process in place to be able to deal with appropriately and refer to the correct agency, correct local authority, the information that we were receiving. It's obviously all an anonymous system. And I mean, looked at it and the system myself and understanding exactly the process for how it works and how people are reporting into it and using it. We've got now, as part of the Vogue programme board, the plans to improve across local authority, across our partners, that publicity, so that we can see continued increase in the use of it, and then the "you said we did" element in terms of the comms back out, so that we are looking to take action to prevent in those areas that are highlighted to us from listening to people.
Good, and it's one that I have been trying to promote quite a lot as well, because I think there is still that anxiety around whether experiences that particularly women and girls are having out in public, whether they count as a crime, and I think most often they are, but I understand that hesitancy to want to report that. But I think the Street Safe app is really helpful in terms of being able to flag that, and then policing and partners can look and put those resources in to try and tackle some of those issues. So I would absolutely encourage people to report it, and it's good to hear that you're using that data and responding to it, because I do think it's a useful source of intelligence. Okay, I think what next one then is we're just doing an update on Vogue strategy.
Yeah, so
wow, sorry, I'm just waiting for the slide to change. Is it thinking? It's a very long lag. Yes, okay, so yeah, it was basically just to talk through any further updates around the Vogue strategy. I know there's a lot of work being done by the police, so other than what we've already kind of touched on, is there anything else you want to just go through? Oh, there it is up there now.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. So, as you know, the national delivery framework is broken into the 3 pillars, so building trust and confidence, relentless pursuit of perpetrators, and safer spaces. There are 34 specific elements of that in terms of the national delivery. As you know, within Merseyside, our programme of work is broken up into 10 projects of work. We're using a project management methodology, and so our programme of work in relation to Vogue is much wider than those 34. So the board last week updates right the way across from all the project leads. That meeting was observed by HMIC FRS. It was really positive to see the development in each of the projects of work in terms of the deliverables along each. So really good, strong progression right the way across the programme of work. We highlighted where we've got really good and innovative practice and best practice across each of those strands that we work across. And also, and as important, is where we're identifying good and best practice and innovative practice from elsewhere, and actually then assessing it ourselves, doing the due diligence and bringing it into being. And we've got numerous examples of where we've done that. So, you know, the focus is clearly going back to, you know, the last half hour's conversation in terms of supporting victims, that confidence and satisfaction to come and report in the first place, and then and ensuring that we are pursuing the perpetrators and bringing them to justice. So the focus remains, you know, all of that programme of work with all of those areas are all focused towards ensuring that we're seeing those positive outcomes. We're starting to see some of the green shoots, undoubtedly, as we've highlighted, and now it's that leadership to make sure that we continue that forward, again, right the way across the partnership, and as you probably referenced, in terms of ensuring that all of our partners and their Vogue strategies are aligned, so actually we're working together to deliver what we need to.
And obviously I launched my Tackling Violence Against Women and Girls strategy last month, which I think has tried to pull together some of the work that's already been captured there. But obviously, from your point of view, you're happy that it all kind of ties together in terms of being able to deliver a better response.
Yeah, so as you know, Nairi Wayne leads this on a day-to-day basis for us, and we've mapped across everything that's in the different strategies. Clearly, we'll continue that ongoing narrative right across the different local authorities and different partnerships. But certainly, in terms of within the different strategies, there's nothing in there that conflicts. And actually, what we've got to do is make sure we marry up the areas that we work together on.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you for that. Next one then, which I think is child sexual exploitation. Wow, it's really slow. Is it changed? No? There we go. Okay, so updates on child sexual exploitation. Louise, are you introducing this, or? Chris, are you going to talk to this?
Yeah, so do you want me to talk through this slide for you, Commissioner? Okay. So I think this just depicts our strategy for what we're doing in terms of tackling child sexual exploitation. So certainly in terms of intelligence collection, ensuring that we have got that link with all of our partnership data, so ensuring that we're collecting data from right the way across Merseyside, identifying where we've got organised crime groups or groups that are offending in this area, both online and in the real world, and ensuring that that data quality is then come together. You know, the partner and third sector intelligence is really, really critical to understanding this area of business. Sorry, I just lost my slide. Sorry? You cover some of this also. Do you want to cover it now?
Commissioner, just to touch on some of the national stuff, which, you know, I've got the national lead for this, which I think is important here. So there's 2 HMIC FRS reviews ongoing at the moment in time. One is online in relation to the national approach to both preventing it, which I've raised before. The key bit of legislation around that will be the online safety bill, which is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to prevent children being harmed online, which clearly has a clear link across in terms of live contact offence. We're working with government in relation to the implementation of that. The other element is how we manage the referrals. We work with the NCA in terms of the referrals that then come into our force. So we've increased our staffing in terms of our online child abuse investigation team. We work with the ROCU in relation to investments, in relation to our undercover online staff, and brought a number of offenders to justice who, but for our online staff, would have been interacting to seek to groom, exploit and abuse children, which we know have a lifelong impact on them. Clearly, technical developments have meant that we've also had to enhance our digital capabilities through our digital forensics team, which was also subject to a recent HMIC FRS inspection. And obviously myself, Chris, supported by Louise, we're doing our own continued audit at the moment in terms of our processes around how we manage all aspects of child protection. So that's the sort of online element. The other key HMIC FRS inspection at the moment is in relation to group-based exploitation, which was commissioned by the government in relation to reports that came out. They were reports based on cases from a number of years ago, but led to the government wanting us to review the current policing response to group-based offending. Again, we have a process in place where our force intelligence team, linked into our public protection teams, our intelligence collection seeks to identify where group-based CSE is taking place to make sure that we've got the appropriate capability and capacity to both bring offenders to justice, but probably more importantly, the work that the Chief Constable has led in relation to preventing this activity in the first place, working with children's homes, working with vulnerable children, the targeting of potential perpetrators, identifying hotspot locations, ensuring that, one, we know where it's happening, and two, we're able to put the appropriate response in place. All these will feature as part of, obviously, a future report by HMIC FRS in the new era, both in terms of data collection, the characteristics both of the children but also of the perpetrators, as well as the locations in which it takes place. So I'll keep this brief. The other key area of this is there's been 3 national reviews recently come to fruition. So the public inquiry, it was a 7-year public inquiry which reported 20 recommendations. At the end of that, key aspects were that were a recommendation in relation to mandatory reporting, a recommendation into relation to financial redress for victims, and some recommendations in relation to a child protection authority or a national authority and agency. I'm linked in with the Home Office in relation to how policing takes them forward. Then you've also got 2 other reviews, a review of children's social care that Josh McAllister led, and a review of the deaths of Arthur Lavinia Hughes and Star Hobson by the national panel review. So the key aspect of this is to make sure that the systems are joined up. We've recently had an inspection in the Wirral, due to be reported on, but demonstrated again some good co-working between social care other partners, particularly the charitable sector, police, our vulnerable persons referral unit, and MASH. But there is some critical elements that need to be coordinated together, and one of the key aspects of that is that the government departments need to be coordinated between DfE, Home Office. There is a recommendation in there around a children's minister to coordinate, otherwise it will sit in some level of silos and won't necessarily achieve the significant change that it's needed as well. I suppose we're here to reassure you and the public of the service that we provide in this area, and our investment in prevention is crucial, from our Safer Schools officers through to our missing persons team, picking up on those early warning signs of exploitation and abuse, through to our links into the VOG, where the majority of victims of this are girls. And we need to make sure that within VOG, while we highlight rape and domestic abuse, that child abuse is obviously a key factor within that as well. So a significant amount of work. We know there is demand issues on our staff. We need to protect their well-being in order that they are well capable to do the job we ask of them. There is more, obviously, the technical elements of this which I've already raised around it. 60% of the online referrals that we get are self-generated indecent imageries. That in no way is victim blaming. That is a fact of normalisation in society now that we need to make sure isn't normalised. We recognise the harmful behaviours that are occurring, because that is both aggravated where offenders will exploit and groom, but also you have a disparity in the law where a child can have a sexual relationship over 16, but sharing of an image under 18 is illegal and within current legislation. So again, that's all work that we're seeking to do nationally to best protect children around it as well. So key role for policing, but key role for the partnerships as well. It's something I'd like to continue to have a discussion around. When you look at child advocates, we look at the role of children's social care, not just at statutory level, but particularly in relation to diversionary activity. The role of education will be being discussed around multi-agency safeguarding arrangements. There is inconsistency in relation to the role of schools within their role in terms of harmful sexual behaviours as well. But an enormous amount of work being done across policing. I can't stress enough the key bit of this is preventing it happening in the first place, because that's, once it does happen, you can never turn it back, and we know the lifelong impact that it has.
Yes, absolutely, no, and I welcome the amount of focus there is on that, both locally and also nationally as well. Okay, thank you for that update. We move on now to the next slide, which I think is economic crime, which I think this has slightly slipped out of order, but for the interest of not going back and forth, we'll do this one now.
Okay, so between the 1st of September 21 and the 1st of September 22, there were a total of 995 fraud-related crimes in Merseyside. That's up on the 950 the year before. There's lots of contributing factors to that. You can see that the highest proportion of that is cheque, plastic card and online bank accounts, accounting for 20%. Online shopping slightly up on last year, 15% compared to 13% the year before. The City of London did a report in 21-22 and reported that the global pandemic had continued to influence levels of fraud reporting, and in the second full year of COVID-19 impacts, we continue to see the above trend of high harm offences such as romance and investment fraud, as well as typologies linked to lockdowns, COVID testing and vaccination processes. But we're now starting to see that reporting fall back in line to pre-pandemic levels. There is the speedily established multi-agency response to COVID-19 fraud has continued to mature during the reporting year, with increased collaboration between counter-fraud law enforcement agencies. So, for example, over 1 million fraud reports received across Action for Fraud, CIFA and UK Finance. That's a £2.46 billion loss. 54,906 reports disseminated to forces for further triage over 21-22. and 64,485 were received back from forces, 11% of those with judicial outcomes. The highest threats in the most recent report are courier, finance, payment diversion, investment and fraud linked to card and online bank accounts, and 83% of it is cyber related. And then again, last is the increase of 82% in the most recent year, from the 66% being reported via online to action fraud. So you can just see the volume increases there.
In terms of the slide that's on there, what does two questions? What does PSP mean when it says on the first one, not PSP? Do you know?
Sorry, Commissioner, where are you looking there?
On that first, where it says check, plastic card and online bank accounts, and then in brackets, not PSP. Do we know what that means?
No, you might have me on that. On that, I'll come back to you on that.
Yeah, please. On the where it says other fraud not covered elsewhere, that's obviously seen a little spike this year. Do we know what's included in other fraud? Sorry, that's a very specific question. You can come back to me if you haven't got it in front of you.
Yeah, I haven't got it in front of me.
No, that's fine.
We'll come back to you. There'll be a variety of very small, specific elements of different frauds that fall into that other category.
Do we know as well how we compare to other forces around this? Is this something that's monitored and comparable? No. And then I suppose in terms of what Merseyside Police's response is to this and some of the challenges, given that I know a lot of it will be international and beyond offenders will be outside of Merseyside, what's Merseyside Police doing to kind of highlight it and encourage reporting and taking action?
Yeah, so as you know, a dedicated economic crime team with a variety of different functionality within that. We work very closely with the North West ROCU as part of us in terms of the additional specialist capability that we have corralled into a regional basis. We're part of the regional strategic governance group that feeds into the national fraud group. So again, in terms of the strong 4Ps plans, we've got the regional plan as well as the force plan. Coming to some more specific elements, we obviously use our community volunteers and fraud fighters, so they do a fantastic job in assisting with victim contact and giving out the prevent message, both in fraud at community engagement events, and they've completed a number of events across the force, specifically most recently in the run-up to Black Friday. So you will have seen certainly a really engaging, innovative comms strategy that was run from the force, again, specifically directed around the known threats from fraud around Black Friday, again, in that preventative space to actually stop the fraud happening in the first place, both online and not. We obviously have invested heavily previously in our fraud abuse safeguarding officers. So again, they'll attend a variety of events, and they do, such as the road traders, and they work closely with local policing. Local policing have recently identified their fraud PCSO SPOCs, so we've got that direct link that comes from the national strategy out through the region into force, and then right down to local level with our PCSO SPOCs. And again, that transfer of information and the fraud messaging, preventative messaging, targeting particular areas. Week in, week out, we see those examples of where the banking protocol may have been implemented. Our safeguarding officers have engaged with vulnerable victims and been able then to actually safeguard and on many occasions return the loss or the losses back to individuals. And quite often those vulnerable people will not have realised they've been victim of fraud until our safeguarding officers are able to sit down with them and go through. So lots lots of work ongoing across our, our strong 4P plan.
Great. Do you want to question, Sue?
Just in terms of vulnerability, Chris, is there anything specific in terms of age demographics that's sort of coming across in relation to these crimes?
So I think depending on the type of fraud that we might be talking about, so you've got different data and different demographics. Whether it's the romance fraud, they will target a particular age group and a particular demographic, versus some of the online and the banking protocol ones, which is clearly towards an older age group. So we have got all of the data in terms of actually which group is more likely to fall victim within the different elements of fraud, and obviously we can tailor our preventative comms messaging and the targeted activity in relation to that, accepting that it's not an exact science.
Okay, good, thank you. And then apologies, there were an extra couple of slides. Louise, do you want to just clarify what these show?
Yes, so this first one shows 2020 to 2021, and it's the disseminations from the national team. So what's been sent into the force to either pursue an offender, protect somebody, or other category. And you can see on the left-hand side, majority of ours in that year were to pursue offenders, and that split there, third each, effectively is from the national team. The next slide then shows this most recent year, and you can see again that the disseminations are pretty much stable and predominantly pursue, less protect from them. The economic crime team have a triage team. They monitor the disseminations from NFIB and will focus on prioritising anything where there's vulnerability. They then will use the fraud abuse safeguarding officers to act on any of the information where there is a safeguarding concern, and liaise with victims, financial institutions, external agencies, etc. And as Chris says, work with local policing teams to make sure that people are protected. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Okay, if we move on now then to modern slavery and human trafficking. So, Louise, I think, if you can talk us through this slide.
Okay, so this is the month-on-month modern slavery occurrences in Merseyside. So we've got offences such as introduced in 2011, such as knowingly holding another person in slavery or servitude, or knowingly requiring another person to perform forced or compulsory labour, and then the Modern Slavery Act being introduced in 2015. You can see there that the number of offences are relatively low across each month. And that's pretty much all there is to say on that slide, Commissioner.
So there's still a challenge around this one in terms of underreporting and it being quite a hidden crime. Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess in terms of the question about the national referral mechanism and how many of the victims are referred in, every victim is referred into the national referral mechanism if they agree to it. So that's obviously it's by consent. Adults, that is, children do not. Our Operation Sanctuary team, so we do have the dedicated team set up. By way of ensuring that that knowledge and awareness across our partner agencies, as well as the within the force, to recognise the signs, to make the referral into Sanctuary. Sanctuary, the staff with the subject matter expertise, to be able to recognise those whether or not this fits within modern slavery, and then respond accordingly. So they conduct daily scans across all of the work across Merseyside to see where we might have missed those referrals coming in. and they ensure that the NRMs are completed. So what we can say is, in terms of the reporting that we have got into force, we've got a strong mechanism in place to ensure that we're quality assuring, that we're picking up all of the cases which are modern slavery, and when consent is given with an adult, not with a child, referrals are made in to the national referral mechanism.
Okay, good, thank you. And then the next one, I think, focuses on human trafficking and what activity is happening across Merseyside when it changes.
Yeah, so clearly you can see in terms of human trafficking, the priorities there of as detailed. Perhaps if I just touch on the data in terms of clandestine events between April this year and September. So there's been 80 incidents with 130 people have entered Merseyside via means of illegal transportation. The most common gender entering the UK illegally through Merseyside remains male, with 84 males and 29 females involved in clandestine events. The countries with the most persons entering the UK through Merseyside illegally was Kuwait, accounting for 19 of those 80 incidents. So about half of the incidents occurred in Liverpool itself. That may be a fact that actually the clandestine entry was clearly at a different point, but because of the method of wanting to then identify as a clandestine, will be at certain points. We'll have certain hotspot areas where they might migrate to, city centre being quite clearly, obviously, one of them. The 12 Quays Ferry Terminal is obviously situated there as well, so that impacts there in terms of foreign nationals who travel illegally or may travel illegally through the common travel area route via Belfast to Liverpool. The most common mode of travel was by walk-in at 31%, followed by boat at 28%. And we're seeing continue a rise in number of occurrences involved in illegal entry via the use of forged documents. Also an increase in the amount of intelligence being received in relation to foreign nationals and the possession of forged identity and identity belonging to multiple different people. We obviously work really closely with, again, the North West ROCU and immigration enforcement to work across the North West, ensuring that that best practice is shared in terms of how we deal and tackle with any forms of clandestine entry. A, to ensure the safeguarding, and B, to ensure that individuals we know who is here and where they are.
And then in terms of the traffickers, so the people who are kind of organising that activity, because we've talked about illegal immigrants, a lot of those people will be very vulnerable and they'll be trafficked in on the basis of a new start, and actually they're being exploited and various other things. How good are we at identifying who those kind of the traffickers, the offender, kind of real serious organised gangs, how good are we at identifying them, and I suppose working with partners and international partners to try and stop them doing it?
Yeah, well, certainly, with my knowledge of what we do on a regional basis with the North West ROCU, linking in with the National Crime Agency. So it's all about gathering the intelligence, making sure that we've got that data sharing so that we identify where we've got trends and patterns and gangs that are operating. We've got a strong tasking and coordinating process in the North West, so that the most appropriate organisation and agency is actually targeting those groups. So we work closely with immigration enforcement on a number of operations that they have across the North West in order to identify those who are bringing people in and trafficking. And there are a number of ongoing both overt and covert operations that I'm aware of that we are doing across the North West with those partner agencies. Okay,
good, thank you. Okay, right, if we move on to hate crime, and then we'll have a short break after this one. I think there's a couple of slides, Louise, if you want to talk us through these.
Thanks, Commissioner. So this first slide here shows the reporting period, so April to September that we're talking about. There's been a total of 2,858 crimes recorded. That's a difference of a reduction of slight, just less than 1%, 0.42%. Majority of the offences in this category are public order offences, so that will be where there's been, people have used explicit language, which is a hate crime slur, for example, in the nighttime economy. We've also had, this is where the categories are intertwined, so with the review of antisocial behaviour and the Home Office counting rules of that, there was an under-reporting of public order offences, so the drive to record accurately the public order offences has then had an impact on the hate crime category as well.
So we're seeing more public order offences recorded that are also hate crimes?
Yes, so we would have seen an antisocial behaviour category, but since we've done our audit and got our tighter processes around the recording of public order, we're also, some of those are hate motivated public order offences. So what we're finding is, say, the nighttime economy, city centre, abuse of takeaways or taxi ranks, those types of things.
So it's better in the sense that we are better acknowledging where it is a hate-motivated crime as opposed to just, some people might dismiss it as antisocial behaviour, albeit that's not low level. Okay.
Okay, and on to the next slide. Just before I go into those, the outcome rate is currently at 13%. So 51 increase in outcomes this year. The hate by type, the vast majority of hate crimes fall under the strand of racial. Over the reporting period, that strand stands for 64% of the total hate crimes across the force, followed by sexual orientation at 22%, disability at 9%, religion 4%, transgender at 3%, and sex worker at 2%. So this year we're seeing that 9% increase, the 0.34% decrease in the amount of offences. And you can see that there, the chart, the racial element is the largest proportion increasing.
So in terms of outcomes then, did you say there's been a slight increase in outcomes?
Yes. We've had 51 more outcomes this year than last year, and that's give us that outcome rate of 13%.
Okay, so it's moving in the right direction as well. Yeah. So is there anything more that's being done to try and improve the outcomes? And I think in particular we get a lot of feedback from partners around where we are getting a successful outcome at court, for example. How are we promoting that to encourage people to come forward and demonstrate that we're holding these people to account?
Yeah, so we are doing more work in terms of strengthening the outcome rate, because whilst we've seen the 51 more cases, because the number have gone up, actually the percentage rate has not seen that jump. So similarly, right across our priority crime areas, they all feature as part of both the ACC's performance meeting and the Deputy Strategic Performance Governance. The crime quality and the crime scrutiny meetings on a monthly basis across strand look at specific dip samples into these type of crime, and again very similar to some of the things we've discussed across our rape and serious sexual assault and domestic abuse. It's ensuring that we're strengthening the knowledge and awareness of staff around the evidential thresholds that they need, the type of evidence that they're gathering at first point of contact, and then, as you said, publicising where we've got successful prosecutions, and our media department are constantly publicising where we've got those strong messages to send out to say, come forward and tell us, because actually we will identify those offenders. We've got some great examples recently where we've used some innovative retrospective facial recognition from some CCTV footage with custody photographs, and we've identified suspects. And then they've been prosecuted, and we've been able to publicise that once they've been dealt with through the court system. So the hate crime coordinators that we've got in place in each of the areas, they will scan and monitor, and they've got good relationships back into force comms and media, and you know, we're constantly discussing it each morning with the chief to make sure that we are publicising those successful outcomes.
Good. Last summer, we obviously saw a significant increase in terms of homophobic incidents, and particularly in the Liverpool City Centre. And there's been a huge amount of work, including the Your Safe Here scheme that I funded, working in partnership with the police and other partners. Have we seen a kind of a similar spike in terms of homophobic crimes this summer, or is there any kind of ongoing concern around that, or do we think that some of that work has addressed any of it, or indeed are we getting more people coming forward because they're more confident to report?
So I think, yeah, I think maybe you've answered the question in some of that, in terms of we're not seeing similar significant spikes through this period of time that we had previously. As you know, an inordinate amount of work has been done with a variety of interventions. I mean, there were a number of factors perhaps that played into you know, the data through 2020 and then into the summer of 2021 with the European football tournament, the weather, etc. But no, we're seeing some real strong outcomes, I think, in terms of some of the work that we've done, as you've highlighted, which has meant that we haven't seen those similar types of spikes, which is really good. That's not to say that we haven't continued to have some offences of that nature within the city.
Okay, and then I had a meeting recently with some members of the Islamic community who were saying that they don't always feel that Islamophobia is particularly understood by the police in terms of how it might differ from other forms of race hate crime, for example. What kind of training and information do you have in place so that officers understand the different types of hate crime and how different people might experience them differently?
Yeah, so clearly we've picked up that feedback, and what we will do now is adapt and make sure that we strengthen the training that is there to all officers. Obviously, as you're aware, all of our new staff coming into the organisation get a significant amount of training, and then we've got the ongoing continuous professional development right across strands, so people do understand and can recognise the different elements of hate crime, and specifically, as you've referenced here, community engagement unit are doing an awful lot of engagement, certainly with some of our youth and our young people, and that is being transferred as well as part of the learning that we're bringing back to our staff. So we certainly hear that feedback, we've listened to it, and it will adapt and mean that we will amend that training to make sure that we deal with that specific feedback.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, all right. Well, I think we'll just have a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll be back shortly. Thanks. Perfect. Right. Okay. Thank you all for coming back. If we carry on with the agenda now, we are moving on to talk about serious and organised crime. So I think the first slide we're going to be talking about is firearms discharges. Louise?
Thanks, Commissioner. This slide just shows you the breakdown by year and then by month of the firearms discharges in Merseyside. So you can see from the slide, in the calendar year 2019, there was 82. In the financial year 2019-2020, 83. And then as that table goes down there, 21 to 22, the lowest number of discharges in 21 years, so 48% decrease at 39 discharges. And then this year, compared to 1920, we've actually seen a 53% decrease in the number of discharges. The next slide here shows the total of discharges, which is the orange, and you can see that chart has come down significantly shown that 58% reduction. The red line is the fatal injury discharges, and the grey is the total shotgun discharges. We've then indicated again where the firearms investigation team have gone down. You can see the decreases since then. Of the 2022 discharges, 25 involved handguns, 2 possibly submachine guns, 8 involved shotguns, 5 submachine guns, and 1 assault rifle. In the bottom right hand, you can then see across the region the number of discharges. So, for example, in the calendar year 2022, we're reporting 39, Lancs 5, GMP 25, the total 70 discharges across the region. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. So I suppose in some ways very positive, because we have had the lowest for 21 years, and there's obviously been some good work to try and reduce that down, which is really welcome. But we obviously still remain significantly higher than the majority of our northwest forces. Is there any kind of reason for that? And I suppose what's the work being done to try and continue that trend of reducing it?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. We're only too aware of the devastation and destruction that one firearms discharge can cause, not least because of the events of through the summer, and certainly this time of year. You know, our teams are still working flat out, and our thoughts are with the families of Olivia, Ashley, and Sam. And we say often within force, you know, one is one too many. The reductions that we've seen have been absolutely fantastic, because it prevents, you know, we got 50% less firearms discharges, and we know that every single firearms discharge could lead to a death. So it's a huge amount of work that's been put in place. We are now seen by the National Criminal Use of Firearms Group as national best practice, and we've had a number of other forces come up to replicate our model in terms of the reductions that we've seen. NCA recently brought over a contingent of Swedish officers also to have a look at our best practice here in force. You know that we have a dedicated firearms investigation team, so we've invested heavily in dedicated resource to investigate every single discharge, and that continues. We invest in our staff heavily in terms of the training at every stage, so whether that is the search trained staff and the recovery of casings and other ballistic material, through to our forensic staff who retrieve the evidential opportunities from our in-house forensic facilities, to the dedicated staff who we have sending all of our ballistic material to the National Ballistic Intelligence Service. And in fact, we are the only force that is ahead of the SLA in terms of the percentage of ballistic material that we send to the National Ballistics Intelligence Service, and routinely we are having forces come to us to have a look at that. We have a strong leadership in terms of looking at all of our Link series firearms to build up conspiracies, and we will have seen in the press very recently the conviction of a young man across Merseyside, convicted on the back of conspiratorial evidence that was put together following his identification as linked to a Link series weapon, and he will be sentenced in a couple of weeks' time. So a really positive example of the whole system working together in terms of the intelligence being gathered at particular discharges where you know, there's limited other evidence, the link between different discharges, and then the evidential capture around each of them to then put the conspiratorial evidence together that ordinarily wouldn't have been identified if you just look at those specific isolated incidents. So that takes a dangerous offender off the streets. It recovers firearms, and actually, if you look at the indictments that he's been charged with, possession of firearms with intent to endanger life, when we're looking at our homicide prevention strategies and what we're doing to ensure we're doing everything to reduce and prevent homicides, then that is a perfect example, and we're expecting to be sentenced to a lengthy custodial sentence. We are obviously very proactive in our open land searches to recover firearms, and again, our recoveries of firearms are very strong. We support the National Firearms Surrender, and in fact, we've launched our own, in the last 12 months, our own firearms surrender, and it's our Chief Superintendent that leads the Regional Strategic Governance Group in relation to firearms. So strong monthly governance meeting, preventative strategies in place, really innovative stuff like bringing in the mini police as well, so that, you know, education and awareness at the appropriate level, at the right level. As I say, strong representation in the regional group, and in fact, there is a national report that's been put together on the back of some research and work in Merseyside in terms of the risks around the lawfully held firearms to unlawful, and a number of recommendations that have been picked up nationally by the national lead and are being rolled out, but again, commenced from Merseyside. So in terms of why is it that we've seen those strong reductions, it's that strong plan, the really strong leadership, and the expertise that we have with some of our staff across the force in dealing with these incidents. But we absolutely will not rest on our laurels, because we know that we need to continue with that downward trajectory to ensure that everyone understands that you cannot possess, transfer, use, discharge a firearm in Merseyside without the full force, both from a law enforcement and our partners, tackling you. And that's the approach that we will continue to take until that number is down to the levels that we see in other areas. In answer to your question about why is it that we still see higher numbers than other forces, so over the last 2 decades, 3 decades across Merseyside, within our organised crime groups and within our urban street gangs, and with the availability of firearms into a big metropolitan city, we follow a trend and pattern like London, Birmingham, Manchester, Merseyside, that is that culture of using and thinking that you can use a firearm because of a dispute is a strong culture within a small minority of criminals. That's what we've got to break. We don't see that same strength of culture of use of firearm in other areas.
No, absolutely, and I really welcome the kind of real focus that Merseyside Police has on this, because, as you say, one, firearms discharges can be life-changing. So I think it's good that we're seeing progress, but obviously continuing that I think is important. Okay, thank you for that. If we move on now then to, so again, we're still talking about serious organised crime and serious violence, but these are covered under the specified information order. Louise, do you want to just explain briefly what that is, and then we'll go to the next slide?
Okay, so the National Crime and Police Outcomes were introduced in 2020, and they are to focus the policing effort on key national priorities, and then allow the performance to be measured and monitored, specifically to demonstrate value for money as well. The key priorities that are included are murder, serious violence, domestic abuse, neighbourhood crime and drug supply in county lines, all measured on a national level. They haven't given numerical targets, it's more of a directional, and the government is expecting to see improvements within the next 3 years. There are a range of metrics. Some is police recorded crime. If you go on to the next slide, Kim, for me, thanks. Some is police recorded crime, so the reduction of murder and homicide. But other areas, such as reducing serious violence, is looking at hospital admissions of under 25s for assault with a sharp object, and that will be using NHS data. So real mixture there. You can see neighbourhood crime, for example. They will measure that through the Crime Survey of England and Wales. The caveat to this is that not all of those metrics are available to forces or available to the public yet. So the Crime Survey of England and Wales, for example, is still being developed and was stopped at some point in time during the pandemic. So they're just reworking how that will, move forward. So for the purposes of your scrutiny meeting, we are using the nearest available data sometimes that's police data, sometimes that's NHS, to be able to give you that overview. The first measure under serious and organised crime is the reduction of murder and other homicide, and for this one we are using police recorded homicides. So this here reflects the crime picture in relation to homicide, and it depicts whether it is domestic related or non-domestic related. So for the financial year 22-23, 5 domestic related homicides, 9 non-domestic related, so that's a total of 14 in total. We then also monitor whether a firearm or a knife has been used. So out of that 14, 3 have had a firearm and 5 have had a knife used. And then that on the right hand side you can see by the financial year the under 25 knife enabled, which links into the serious violence category, and you can see for this most recent year no homicides of under 25s that are knife enabled.
Okay, so again, some, I suppose some positive in terms of it's reducing, but obviously still some very sad outcomes. In terms of the domestic homicides, do we know how many of them have had domestic homicide reviews since last November?
Yeah, Commissioner, so there's been 16 since November 2021. This obviously now includes, in terms of domestic homicide reviews, situations where suicide has taken place within a domestic abuse history or setting. 16 of those have been referred in for consideration of the domestic homicide review. 5 have been agreed. The other 11 remain outstanding for a decision at the moment, so they'll be with the different boards to make the decision based on all of the management information that comes in from the different partners. We track and we monitor all of the outcome and recommendation from domestic homicide reviews. So that's within the vulnerability strategic meeting across the force. So there's a dedicated officer responsible for making sure that we're picking up any learning, both as those reviews are ongoing and then with the recommendations at the end. And then they all come into the Crime Risk Review Board that I chair on a quarterly basis that looks at particular risks in terms of our overall crime allocations across the force.
Okay, good, thank you. In terms of the broader approach then to reducing homicide, what is Merseyside's homicide strategy? And I think you've already touched on it a little bit with some of the work around firearms, but is there anything in particular around how we prevent it?
Yeah, so we're working very closely, and we are represented on the MPCC national group in relation to the development of the homicide prevention framework and strategy. So in terms of the themes that fall under the homicide, so you've got serious violence, drugs, vulnerability, domestic abuse, serious and organised crime. We have really strong preventative strategies in all of those areas. And so our homicide prevention strategy effectively is the umbrella term that goes over all of the specific strategies that we have. And they've all got strong 4P plans, prevention being a key element of it. And then from a national basis, the areas of focus at the moment in terms of that prevention framework, so knife crime, offender management, the nighttime economy, mental health, alcohol, child protection, youth violence, threats to life, safeguarding, gangs, county lines and gun crime. So all areas that we've either touched on today or we know that are a strong part of the work that we do across Merseyside. Identified nationally in terms of the toolkit as part of our homicide prevention framework nationally. And this is the bit where we sort of QA against ourselves in terms of saying, right, well, is this something that we're doing? Are we strong at? So violence reduction units. Well, we have one of the strongest violence reduction partnerships within the country. Safer streets. We are embedded, and again, we're a strong proponent of safer streets. Problem solving. So again, really core at the core of what we do across Merseyside. Post-homicide reviews, we are one of only a small handful of forces at the moment that are actually doing post-homicide reviews, so we are already set up. We've already done 3 of those, led by our new head of the prevention strand, again internally with partners. The key focus to look very quickly after a homicide at any prevention opportunities that might impact upon strategy or delivery as we go. Risk identification, vulnerability identification, hotspot policing. Well, again, hotspot policing is a core part of our serious violence prevention and strategy. There's a couple on here that clearly we will look to move into that space in a wider sense: electronic monitoring and use of the crime reduction toolkit. So in terms of the national framework and where we sit in Merseyside, we've got a really strong overlay. We're engaged with that national team. We undoubtedly have got some innovative practice that others are coming to look at, notably the post-homicide reviews. But I think the work that we've done over many years, and HMIC FRS since 2014 have graded us outstanding for our response to serious and organised crime, which again features strongly in the themes and the underlying causes and root causes that lead to homicide. So.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Right, if we move on then to serious violence.
Thanks, Commissioner. So under the reduction of serious violence, there's 2 national measures. The first one, which is referred to as the critical success factor, is the reduction of hospital admissions for assaults with a knife object or sharp objects, especially those under 25. For that one, we are showing a 14% decrease this financial year to date. So that's a reduction from 711 to 612. And then the second one, the critical success factor 2, is a reduction in knife-enabled serious violence, especially those victims under 25. And for that, we are seeing a 17% decrease, so from 279 offences to 232. That's a 17% decrease in those under 25 and an 11% decrease in the victims aged 25 and over.
Okay, I mean, that feels like quite a positive downward trend. Is that, do we know if that's reflected in other force areas? Are we able to compare that with other areas?
We're not able to compare it to other areas, unfortunately.
Anything to comment on in particular approach to reduction in knife crime?
Largely, obviously, Chris covered the majority of our work, so we have a plan led through Phil Mullally around it. It's part of the wider serious violence operational target approach that we have. Clearly, the areas are targeting suspects and locations, acting on intelligence, gaining confidence through reassurance, engaging partners, and teaching, learning and sharing. Hotspot work with Louise and team has proven really successful in relation to deploying and tracking where our staff are and the difference that makes in terms of reducing significantly serious violence and knife crime that remains ongoing across Merseyside. Enhanced problem solving, working with partners through the VRP. We are also due to go live on the 1st of April regarding the piloting of serious violence reduction orders. It's a new legal power that will target knife carriers, and the order will enable officers to target those involved in knife crime and undertake a search of the individuals in public who are placed on an order. It's a really significant piece of legislation and will allow us to, more robust than we are already, tackle knife offenders robustly around it. You know, we take place twice a year with Operation Sceptre, a national operation, highlighting the work we do around knife crime, all different tactical options, including test purchasing, knife surrenders, working with Border Force regarding weapon importations, open land searches, and particularly, obviously, most importantly, working with communities and schools to educate around the dangers of knives. And this was highlighted in November, our work on Granada reports and the BBC as well. And clearly the work of the Violence Reduction Partnership, led by Siobhan and team, through obviously into your governance, looks at a longer-term public health approach to reducing serious violence as well. So while we'll concentrate on knife crime specifically, we'll also look at obviously the wider impact of harm around serious violence. We've also funded Knife Savers, and I suppose the work of the ERP is most importantly looking at changing perceptions, improving confidence, and looking at life skills of young people or those involved or on the cusp of being involved in crime.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you for that. Next slide then, Louise.
This slide shows the county lines closed in the last 7 months, so 7 months into the financial year 22-23. You can see on the left-hand table 210 county lines closed year to date, and it says Type 1, Type 2. Type 1 is a line closure where the county line holder has been arrested and charged, and Type 2 is a line closure where the county line phone number SIM has been deactivated. You can see there that the for Merseyside, the locations of the county line closed by optoxic, 106 for Merseyside, and then 210 right across all those areas. On the right-hand side, the internal county lines closures by local policing area, the majority of those being closed within Liverpool and Wirral.
Commissioner, sorry, if I could just add on to that. So, you know, in terms of the county lines work and the dedicated staff that we have under Medusa working across, we're on track to meet the Home Office metric of 400 closures by March 2023. I know you recently had a specific briefing about this. We continue to share best practice across the country with other forces. We're recognised by the national team as being being the best performing team across the UK. Clear, hold and build, which I know we'll no doubt come on to, is being rolled out in 3 more areas. And the team recently were awarded a Community First award. So, you know, real strong performance in this area. And certainly when you look at the number of young people that have been safeguarded, that's again significant preventative work to actually stop young people from being drawn into what is quite a dreadful environment.
Next slide just shows some of those successes, Commissioner. So for Operation Medusa and Operation Toxic, 200 line close, 153 weapons seized, 322 arrests, 100% arrest rate for Operation Toxic, 63 convictions, over £400,000 in cash seized, 40 kilograms of drugs seized.
Commissioner, I think you cannot stress enough, as the points that Chris raised, the importance of what's been achieved here in the last 3 or 4 years around it. We look back where the harm nominals from Merseyside were committing, both in Merseyside and elsewhere in the country, and the need to join that up. We have undoubtedly benefited from funding of that, but the approach that Merseyside taken has clearly benefited making Merseyside communities safer, particularly young people who are being exploited. But also we look back at some horrendous homicides that were happening elsewhere in the country committed by individuals that were coming from Merseyside. The reason why I stress this is going to be really important as we move forward, particularly around the budget and finances. That additionality has benefited the national landscape, undoubtedly. And we know we've got further year funding in relation to that. But as clearly further discussions take place, when we look at the impact and what that translates into staffing, when you look at Merseyside compared to some other areas, when we look back to 2010 and the comparisons, we must continue, as we will, obviously with your support, continue to make the case of the importance of this additionality, because this is something that's here and will need to continue for the safety of our public and those nationally, because there is a phenomenal footprint, as you know, from Merseyside nominals committing this crime elsewhere in the country as well. So I think it's something we just really need to continue to press on the importance of that additionality.
Absolutely. I've had a lot of positive feedback from colleagues across the country where we have seen Merseyside criminals, causing chaos because of the harm of dealing drugs and things in their communities. And actually the funding and the work that's being done by Merseyside is having a benefit beyond Merseyside as well. And I think we're seeing that a lot. So absolutely, I think feeding that back in terms of giving us those resources to be able to deal with some of those issues, we can see the benefits from it. So absolutely, we'll continue to make that case. Okay, next slide. Is there anything to add, Chris, on this?
Yeah, so just some other success factors under Operation Stonehaven, which is the preventative and partnership element. So, over 40 internal and external partners, charities and third sector bodies are now part of that Stonehaven approach, both to divert young people or to provide them with opportunities so that they move away and are prevented from engaging in criminality. 442 individuals engaged with statutory safeguarding partners, and then 258 that have gone to specialist providers, again for training, education or work. And again, the benefit of that to them as an individual, their families, their community, and the region is just absolutely immeasurable. And then under Operation Denari, which is the financial element, so dedicated financial analysts and financial investigators working alongside to ensure that where we do the pursue and the proactive activity, we are taking off from the criminals and those engaged in criminality the criminal assets. So nearly £500,000 worth of cash recovered year to date, just as part of this operation. So just as part of this, over £500,000 taken from the hands of criminals who would otherwise use it for their own benefit. And again, that is we've seen that both in Merseyside and in other forces. So it's a strong picture.
Good, excellent, very positive work. Okay, the next ones then I think are around burglary and robbery, which we have already touched on at the beginning of the meeting. But do you want to just briefly show what they show and then we'll move on?
Okay, so this chart shows the measure of all burglary, so that will include residential burglary and non-residential burglary. It shows that for the financial year to date, this year we've had 3,300 offences. That's a 14.4% reduction on the previous year. Burglary residential accounts for 76% of the total category, so 2,505 of that 3,300 of all a burglary crime, and the remaining 24% is that business and community. When you look at the assault outcome rate, we've currently got a assault outcome rate of 8%. That compares to 4.3% last year. We currently I've got the third highest outcome rate in our most similar group. So the England and Wales average is 6.8, we're at 8. Most similar group average is at 7%, and we're at
8%. Robbery, anything?
Okay, again, this is the robbery slide. It's all robbery, so it include personal and business robbery. This year there's been 724 offences of robbery so far this financial year to date. That's static with the previous year, which had 723 at the same point. Personal robbery accounts for 91%, and 9% business robbery. The solved outcome rate this year has increased this financial year compared to last financial year, so from 4.1% to 10.8%, so 30 solved up to 78 solved. The most similar group, again, the force is currently third highest outcome rate at 11.3. with the England and Wales average being a 9.2 and the most similar group average being a 10.6.
So outcome rate wise, that's a good, did you say that was from 4 to 10%? So obviously still a way to go, but actually significant progress on last year, which is really welcome. Yeah, good. Okay, next one, theft.
Next one is theft person. In terms of financial year to date, there's been a 10% decrease compared to the same period in 2021. You can see them from the chart on the right hand side. We are forecasting a further reduction of 4.7%. With regards to the outcomes, there's been a decrease this financial year compared to last. So we're currently at 1.4% compared to 1.9% last year. With regards to the region, the England and Wales is actually at 1.5% as well. The region is at 2.9%, so lower than the regional average, but in line with the England and Wales average. This next one is the theft / unauthorised taking of a motor vehicle. So far this year, we've had 1,770 offences. That's an increase of 4.5%. We are, as you can see on the right-hand side table, predicting a slight increase of 0.9 by the end of the financial year. The outcomes has increased this year from 5.1 to 5.6. And the England, and we are currently, we've actually got the highest outcome rate of the most similar group at 5.7. The most similar group average is 3.7. The England and Wales outcome rate is at 3.4.
So sorry to say that last bit again. So where do we compare in terms of?
So we're currently at 5.7. The region average is 3.7, and the national average is 3.4.
Okay. Okay. So again, better than average, which we welcome, albeit we'd like everybody to be reaching higher. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything in particular being done around kind of motor vehicle theft, and what's the kind of force, kind of activity around this? Who's?
Yes, I'll take this, Commissioner. So, Zoe Thornton leads across local policing for this for us. Again, it forms part of both the ACC performance and the DEP strategic governance. And each of the geographical areas now have their cross-strand performance meetings, and again, ensuring that we've got sufficient plans in place to target this, accepting that in terms of balancing our resource against priorities and priority threat areas. Clearly, in terms of some of our serious violence, our domestic abuse, our rape and serious sexual assault, etc., this does feature in a different layer in terms of the level of resource and the priority. Jenny Sims, as you know, is the MPCC lead for this, so we've got a good link into some of the innovative practice and some of the work that's done nationally to bring back. Operation Shepherd, as you know, is the overarching operation at this time of year to tackle all of the vulnerability crime types that we would generally see. To make sure that we've got strong preventative plans in place, but also to pursue offenders. And we're still using some of those slightly older tactics now, but the ones that work, such as Operation Handle and the hotspot policing, which is the more innovative new stuff. So plans are there and in place. It's right that we would look to improve and increase the number of outcomes, but given the national position that we find ourselves in, and in terms of our most similar forces, I think the plans are robust enough at the moment to continue to see some of those increases.
Great, thank you very much for that. Okay, next one then. So this is obviously the victim satisfaction around domestic abuse, which again we did touch on earlier, but do you want to just kind of describe the graph, what it shows, and then we'll kind of move on?
Thanks, Commissioner. So this shows the the satisfaction rate by what we refer to as the 5 stages of satisfaction. It then breaks it down by month across the financial years. So ease of contacts, the satisfaction rate has fluctuated between 86% to 100% since January 2022. The current satisfaction rate is at 90%, and that's remained unchanged since July 2022. Actions taken has also fluctuated between 54 and 80%. We have some periods where, say in May, for example, it was at 54%, and then we're now seeing a current satisfaction rate of 71%. Follow-up has fluctuating satisfaction rates ranging from 32% to 67%. The most recent satisfaction rate in August is at 64%. And then treatment ranges between 77 and 100%. August is showing at 93% satisfaction rate. And then whole experience 82 to 96. And again, whole experience for August at 93%.
So just reflecting on that, it looks like that follow-up stage is the bit that seems to be, I suppose, the bit that needs a bit of the most feedback from the victims around where there needs to be a bit of work. Is that being factored in into all that work you were talking about around VOG?
Yeah, so key feature as part of the CPD of DA intensification and you know the increased knowledge and awareness and training to staff, part of the vulnerability training, and it will factor in as well in terms of next year when we're likely to embark on some DA matters training as well, having had some notification of potentially some funding that we'll be eligible to bid for.
Okay, next one then is around cybercrime.
Okay, so for this one, the Digital Policing Pack have not published any data for this. So this is the nearest that we've got, which is police recorded data. You can see from the chart that the volumes are high, 268,000 for example. You can see 268 in November, 837 the month before that. Cybercrime is a flag, a bit like a domestic abuse flag, so it's against the all crime picture, and then if it's got a cyber element on it, it will be categorised within this. So there is an element of duplication with all of the crimes that we've talked about before. If it's being used, but via the online or computer or anything like that, it will be in this category. There has been, financial year to date, a total of 7,330 cyber crimes recorded, of which 73% relate to stalking and harassment. So that's where that domestic abuse element comes into play. Majority of victims are aged between 25 and 34. Females make up the majority with 65%. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say on that one.
Do we know why there's been a reduction in, what was it, is it April, May? And then it's kind of stayed down? Did something happen in May, recording-wise, or do we know why there's been a reduction?
So I think that's some of what Louise has alluded to in terms of some of the data quality issues that have been identified, and so we anticipate that with some remedial action that's already started in force, we'll see that level out and corrected.
Great, thank you. Okay, if we move on now then to complaints.
Okay, so this chart shows the complaints lodged or recorded over the last 12 months, ending in September 22. Each month, the majority of the complaint cases are lodged as non-Schedule 3, at 91%, and 9% recorded under Schedule 3. On average, 194 dissatisfaction complaints have been lodged or recorded each month, and a total of 2,334 for the last 12 months. With regards to finalised complaint allegations, during October 21 to September 22, there was 3,401 complaint allegations finalised. The majority of complaint allegations, so 90%, are resolved with the service provided acceptable, and 3% of the complaint allegations have been finalised as service provided not acceptable. Okay.
Are there any particular themes that are coming up from the complaints in terms of the issues that people are raising?
So, Commissioner, the majority of complaints about the delivery of duties and service, police powers, policy and procedure and individual behaviours. Just to expand on that, I suppose the delivery of duties and service includes police action, following contact, decisions and general service. Disproportionality complaints and themes related to VOG. We track those via PSD performance governance into my own meeting structures to ensure themes are identified, which informs future training, delivery, cross-strand comms and head of strand briefings. So Jen Wilson sits on, for example, the VOG board that Chris leads on, sits on the inclusion board that Jenny Sims and sits on Jenny's leadership board as well, to make sure that them themes are tracked and then actually make a tangible difference in terms of our delivery and our training as well. And as you know, the chief attends, for example, the academy with new recruits. The PSD attend that as well, and there are consistent themes around that. We are also just about to relaunch some further programmes around conduct and standards, building on some of our earlier discussion around vetting and some of the issues that came out of the case report, and obviously some issues that we've dealt with and addressed within Merseyside Police as well.
Okay, good, thank you. Do we know how many of the Schedule 3 complaints have led to misconduct outcomes?
We've returned this back into your office just for some further clarity around that, just in order to be able to be really clear in terms of what it is we're seeking. So if we can just provide that outside the meeting, please, thank you.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Okay, great, right, thank you for that. If we move on now then to financial position. Keith, you sat there very patiently through the detail. If you can give us the update on this, please.
Is that better? Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, so year to date, as at the position at the end of September, in total we were £6.2 million underspent, which was £1.2 million on normal budgets, business as usual budgets, and £5 million on Operation Uplift budget. And as you're aware, Operation Uplift is the additional police officer recruitment and some police staff to go with that, as per the national position. The reason we've got such a large underspend on there is there's a variety of reasons. First of all, we're still recruiting all the officers, and the full drive ends at the 31st of March. We've also had issues, the national issues with things like sourcing vehicles, delivery times with equipment, through various, as part of the pandemic, Ukraine, all these have all factored in. So as the year goes on, we expect to start to really eat into that underspend, along with the various activity from operational proceedings as well. So what we'll see is a sort of similar position by year end. So we expect to really eat into that, and we'll probably looking at around about a £5 to £6 million underspend. But it's a non-recurrent position. As we enter 23-24, that will erode as we face significant pressures on pay and non-pay.
So do we have a plan for what's going to happen with the underspend? How are we going to spend it?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're now able to find, we actually source vehicles, and vehicles are starting to come through a little bit, not to the levels we require, but they're starting to come through, so we'll start to spend that along with some essential estates work. Things are moving along a bit more now on supply chains, so we're able to source a lot more equipment. So yes, we'll start eating into that underspend as the year goes on.
Okay, and then in terms of, you mentioned that's not going to be a continuing position, and I'm aware of the pressures on the budget in terms of required savings. Do we have any plan for how we're going to achieve some of the savings that we're going to have to find?
Well, we have sort of, we're looking at a £3 million savings target for this year alone, and we expect to achieve that. So the force isn't standing still on these things. We've also utilised reserves as well in year as well, so they're underpinning some of that financial position. As we move forward, we've still got savings outlined within the medium-term financial strategy, and for the continual sort of growth in pay and non-pay costs, we're building up a number of factors in that to tackle that, and that'll include transformational savings as well, and that work's underway at the moment.
Okay, thank you. If we move on to capital.
Okay, thank you. So, in some ways, a similar position to some of the revenue budgets. Underspends, we're finding it's delays on getting some of the items through, the major items through, but also, as you're aware, we're producing a new estate strategy. So some of the initial plans we had for major improvements on buildings or new buildings, we've paused until we develop that strategy, and with expectation April, May time we'll have that ready. So in the meantime, we continue to carry on with what we've already got and what we can do, but that underspend will transfer into 23-24, or we'll utilise that some other way.
Okay, great, thank you. And then lastly, the balance sheet.
Okay, so this is just to highlight a couple of areas really. We're just mindful at the moment on the impact of the interest rate increases that everyone will have seen across the public and across national positions. So we continue to watch that. We've got a nice balance at the moment, a really prudent balance of short and long term borrowing and some short term investments as well. Something we continue to monitor during the next few months, and at the appropriate time we'll move funds between the different types of investments and deposits as well as the borrowing.
Great, thank you. John, did you have anything to add or a question? Are you happy?
No, I think Keith's covered everything there, to be honest. There will be a further update in the budget report in terms of the forecast for year end. So that's something that we'll build on in this picture here.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you, Keith. Okay, right, so we'll move on now then, as we're near the end of the meeting, around public questions. So as colleagues will be aware, we invite the public to submit questions to me, so I can put them to the Chief and the team. I think we've got 4 questions, which, interestingly, are all about road safety, and we will be looking at road safety in more detail in a future scrutiny meeting, so I'm sure we'll probably delve into these details, delve into these questions a lot more. But in terms of if I ask the questions and get responses from the team, as a road user on foot, on a cycle, and as a car driver and also a bus passenger, I see so much road rage, speeding, footway parking, blocking access to wheelchair users and people with prams, drink and drug driving, no insurance, etc., but a lack of enforcement by police due to low numbers of traffic police. Will the numbers of traffic police be increased to enforce all of the above? And I want to...
Thanks, Commissioner. I'll answer that question. So I guess there's 2 elements to the question. So the firstly is around plans to increase the number of road policing officers. You'll be aware of the operational review that is currently in place, and we are certainly reviewing our allocation of road policing resources within that review. No decisions have yet been made, but certainly that's one for us to consider, and that we'll take that forward. But just in terms of the general issue around tackling poor driving behaviour, there is a commitment to deal with that. There's certainly evidence that we've taken that seriously in terms of 3,200 separate pieces of enforcement in relation to those offences that were outlined in the question, and with the focus on the fatal 4 key offences around excess speed, no seatbelt, distraction, and drug driving. Our commitment to the drug issues, particularly this time of year, is clear. Over 300 arrests for Operation Limit, that was previously Operation Nemesis. So it does prove that we do take roads policing and the killed, seriously injured very seriously, and will continue to do so.
And I think, if I can add as well, I went out with some of the traffic police a couple of weeks ago as part of the drink and drug driving operation, and I was very impressed actually. They were very proactive and very good at identifying people and and then enforcing it, and actually made a number of arrests, which was really welcome, including taxi drivers who had passengers who could have put their lives at risk. So I think there is a lot of work being done, notwithstanding the the review that's ongoing around whether there's more resource needed. But I was very impressed with what I saw, so that was good.
And Commissioner, if I may just also add the Road Safety Partnership. You obviously aware there's a new chair. I think you've met with Jonathan Davis. Clearly, very much an intent there to deliver on the key priorities within the Road Safety Partnership. Going to review tactical delivery to ensure that we're all linked together in terms of that delivery plan, and hoping to see some real benefit in the next year. Yeah,
okay, good. So the next question then was around Operation Close Pass for errant driver enforcement, along with re-education and training of errant drivers. I don't know if there's anything to add specifically for that.
Yeah, I'll cover that one as well. So we haven't used Operation Close Pass for some time now, but police officers do have the power to deal with incidents where a close pass has been witnessed. And alternatively, the force does encourage cyclists with CCTV footage to submit instances where the vehicles pass without leaving sufficient space via the portal on the force website under the reports tab. We've received over 9,000 submissions of CCTV this year. And when the footage has been reviewed for suitability, over 1,000 submissions have been processed, and 30% of the submissions have resulted in either advice or an educational course, with 17% of those resulted in a prosecution. So we do encourage anyone with CCTV footage of possible road traffic offences to submit them for consideration by this means. And again, I think clear evidence that we do take this issue very seriously.
I actually remember attending an Operation Close Pass when I was deputy a few years ago, and it was very good. You could see that real challenge was there. So I think, if there's an opportunity to bring some of that back, I think that would be very welcome. The next question then is around the use of bicycles and scooters on pavement, and obviously some of the new e-bikes and e-scooters that are obviously travelling quite fast. What work is being done to tackle some of that?
So, Commissioner, our response to off-road bikes covering the illegal use of electric bikes and scooters is under Operation Brookdale that we've run for a number of years now. We're very much aware of the illegal antisocial use of those devices, although the legislation is, I guess, somewhat confused, I suppose is one way we describe it at this point. And certainly there are efforts to try and lobby Parliament to ensure that we can streamline some of that legislation. There's, as you know, a pilot scheme around electric scooters operating in the city centre, and each local policing area has a dedicated officer that coordinates activity around Operation Brookdale, and that involves days of enforcement activity targeted at the hotspot areas, a regular review of the intelligence reports to ensure that anything actionable is followed up, education at schools around the illegal use of such devices, and training around legislation for officers. All local policing areas provide an update to the tactical roads policing meeting, and then I chair the quarterly strategic roads policing meeting, and there's an agenda item around Brookdale where we review activity and ensure that the activity we do is focused on the areas that are causing us the highest problems, and certainly causing the public and community the highest issues and problems.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the last question then from the public was specifically around, is it true that the traffic police no longer deal with dangerous parking or illegal parking on double white lines? And I know this is something that is a point of contention that I get a lot of feedback from. Having whether they should be, I believe parking on double white lines arrives in endorsable points on a driving licence. It's the same as speeding. It's not just a council matter. And there's a feeling, I think, from this resident that if there was a car with flashing lights and the police presence, it might get more of a response.
Yeah, Commissioner, I'll just cover the legislation and that issue specifically. So we do, or the police deal with the offence of dangerous parking. Rule 240 of the Highway Code prohibits the stopping or parking of a vehicle or a trailer under a number of specified circumstances, which include a road marked with double white lines, even when a broken white line is on your side of the road, except to pick up or set down passengers or to load or unload goods. That rule is obviously there to promote road safety. The double white line the double white line system is painted with the purpose of warning drivers of the presence of a hazard. Parking adjacent to these lines presents another hazard by causing a vehicle using the road to straddle or cross the solid white line and bringing them in conflict with the opposing traffic, and also causing the vehicle to overtake pedestrians, horses, riders or cyclists too close in an attempt to avoid crossing or straddling the solid white lines. So under Section 22 of the Road Traffic Act 1988, the offence of leaving the vehicle in a dangerous position could be considered as such. So dangerous parking in those circumstances will be dealt with by issue of an enforcement notice, which is 3 penalty points and a £100 fine, and that is activity we do undertake in those circumstances.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Some technical detail in there, but I think useful to understand the difference. Okay, and I think that's all the questions. And I suppose just to say thank you as well to the public who do submit them. We do get lots of questions submitted, and those that we haven't had time to ask today, we will try and get a response out to you on behalf of Merseyside Police. But I'm very grateful to people that do submit them, because I think it's good to have this opportunity to ask these questions. So that brings us to the end of this meeting. I'm not aware of any other business, unless anybody has anything they want to flag. No? Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Thank you, everybody who was watching online. The next meeting is going to be Monday, the 20th of March at 10 a.m, and we're going to be focusing on response policing, 999, 101 calls, and that kind of visible policing approach as well, but there'll be more details near the time. So thank you very much for attending, and I hope you have a nice Christmas.